I was really lucky as a young fella growing up. I got to grow up in beautiful country towns in remote Northern Territory. So places I get to call home include Nhulunbuy in East Arnhem Land and Jabiru in Kakadu National Park. And so in the last couple of years, I've been volunteering on the board of the Northern Territory Rugby Union, just trying to give back to an organisation that gave me a bunch as a young fella. And in that time, I've had countless conversations with Indigenous communities, rugby organisations and schools. And in listening to some of the problems they're trying to solve, I've created Deadly Rugby. And so Deadly Rugby is about making a difference in kids' lives. And so it's about making a difference in Indigenous kids' lives through access to sport and sporting equipment, and making a difference for non-Indigenous kids by creating cultural immersion programs that create cultural champions in our kids. I want our kids to be as proud of our First Nations people and culture as the Kiwis are of the Maori, and I think that's an ambition that we deserve. So, what is Deadly Rugby? So Deadly Rugby has three parts. The first part is about creating Indigenous rugby programs in remote communities. And so we connect Indigenous kids at schools with local rugby clubs, and we create a rugby program. So if they go to school, they get to go to rugby training. At the end of training, they get a feed. And so hopefully at the end of the day, they've been to school, kicked a footy round, belly full of tucker, ready for an early night's sleep to get them fired up for school the next day. So that's Deadly Rugby. There's also Deadly Rugby gear. In talking to some private schools around the country, they tell me that they upgrade their gear in the name of privilege pretty regularly. And they're happy to support Deadly Rugby by giving me that gear so that I can then send it to the remote communities and put it in the hands of kids that don't have access to it, so that we can create fair access to sporting equipment. And then there's Deadly Rugby Camp. And Deadly Rugby Camp is about, we're looking to run our first Deadly Rugby Camp in Easter next year. And schools will fly into Darwin and they'll take part in the cultural immersion program like no other. It's not about the rugby, it's country, culture, rugby. Rugby's third. So the first thing they'll do is they'll go visit spectacular, breathtaking country in the Northern Territory. They'll meet the traditional owners of the land and they'll have a cultural immersion and education program like no other. So they'll go back to their communities, their mates and their schools as cultural champions. But it's also about giving back to local communities. And so these schools will run integrated training sessions so that local players and coaches can train and coach alongside these elite schools, developing the game and inspiring participation in sport in local communities. And then it's about the rugby. They'll play a few games against each other, and those games will be streamed to their alumni. So why would you want to get involved? So it's not just about making difference in kids' lives. It's quite a commercial opportunity for organisations as well. So at the end of the rugby camp, we're going to create a marketing video. And that video will be distributed to schools around the country to promote the next camp in September. And why is this important to an organisation? Well, because the audience of that marketing content will be parents of kids in private schools. So these are business leaders and top 2% money earners in the country. When you think about these sports camps, just in New South Wales and Queensland alone across private and Catholic schools, parents spend over $500 million a year on sports programs. If you just look at the audience size and you assume that 35% of the student population are between years 8 and 12, and you consider just a 10% market penetration of the Queensland and New South Wales cohort, that's over 100,000 kids' parents. So that's the audience that we'll be marketing to. The best part about this marketing database, apart from the fact that it's targeted, is that it grows by 30,000 people every single year. So I'd love to talk to you about being a part of Deadly Rugby and helping to make a difference in kids' lives.